What's up, y'all? We want to welcome you back to the Ep.8 podcast. My name is Kevin, and I'm here with our good friends Joseph and Connie.
And we're back, man.
We
Part
are
two.
back.
Let's go.
Yes.
Connie, we're happy you're here.
Thank you.
Again, we've gotten a lot of great feedback from our podcast last week, and we're just excited to go even deeper than we
Even
did last week
deeper.
and go
Oh,
part
yeah.
two.
Yep, definitely.
That's good. I mean, because I definitely feel like in reflecting back on the last couple podcasts, it's good having her here because
thank you.
and I'm not just flattering you. Like because the real reason is because Joseph and I have struggled sometimes in the podcast where we like walk away and we're like, man, we could have hit this hard. We could have gone on this better,
Yeah.
and having that third person to kind of just like, help us along and just be like, all right, no, let's stay here. Let's keep talking about this, so.
It's about asking the right questions,
Yes, asking the right questions and staying on that topic
Yeah.
that, we want to go a little bit deeper on. And,
Mm-hmm.
last week, and it's also great to have a female and woman perspective on now.
It's always good.
Because sometimes, definitely we have people like, yeah, you guys just give the male perspective. And, we are.
It brings some sort of
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think we talked about it.
Yeah.
That there's just certain topics that it would be nice to have a balance.
Yeah.
And there's other topics that you don't really need it. So I'm glad that I'm here with you guys. So thanks so
Yeah.
much for having me
Of
again.
course, and you're so wise. So
Yes,
for me,
you're
like,
so wise.
I'm happy to just learn.
I learned so
I'm
much
learning
last
from you
week.
guys too.
Yeah, I guess so.
We're all learning together. It's a journey, and that's what we
Absolutely.
talked about
There we go. There we
previously.
go.
We're all, you guys get to hear from my experience, and those that are hearing the podcast. These are mistakes that I did, and I hope that you guys can learn from what I've done. And so we're all just vibing together. So
There we go. So Kevin, tell us how we starting off today.
We're talking about expectations.
oh,
We're talking. So first and foremost, we're talking about we're continuing our relationships, right? We're going deep into now. We talked about dating a little. We're gonna go deep into forming good relationships with significant others and whatnot. And so today, I guess we're starting off with talking about expectations in those relationships.
yep.
Perfect. So, when it came to expectations with me, right, I think sometimes I find it difficult. Like, I set too high of standards for myself, right? And also with people that I'm searching for.
For you or for people like.
For people I'm searching for,
Okay,
right?
so
Yeah.
expectations on the one.
On the one.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, let's start there. Is there
there a one?
Is there a one?
Is there a one? Well, what do you guys think? I'm kind of curious.
Okay. Well, Joseph gave me a nod, so I can
Yeah.
hit this one. No. So I don't believe in the one. Personally,
Okay.
I don't believe in the one. Sorry,
Okay.
Vanessa.
Wow.
Sorry.
So no, and she knows this, so this is nothing new.
Yeah, it's just it's your perspective
yeah.
on this
Kevin's
topic.
had many ones. I'm sure.
No,
in
no,
his lifetime.
and that's not it either.
Okay.
So it's not to just say
Yes,
like, oh,
please
there are multiple
elaborate.
ones.
I'm really kind of curious about this.
So I don't believe in the one as in like there is one person that somehow like the stars are gonna align or God's got planned like, all right, this person is destined to be with that person.
Okay.
The way I see it is I don't believe in the one, I believe in the right person.
Okay.
And the way I can explain the right person is just depending on where you are in life and your value system, your belief system, your experiences and whatnot. And you can meet someone who basically meets not just meets those expectations that you have, but more or less like their values align with yours, their
Okay.
personality aligns with yours, your goals align together, and it's not so much that for me it's not so much like, oh, the stars have it set that those two are destined to be together, but it's more like, what, you enjoy the other person, you see that there is potential in this going somewhere.
Okay.
And then what, you in my case, right, I've just prayed to God and asked him like, hey, what, if this is the person, this is the right person that I could potentially spend the rest of my life with, then if God's gonna bless it, then he will bless it, and if not, then I'm sure I will be able to go in a different direction.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, no, I think I don't believe in the one.
Okay.
And here's my thing.
Number two. All right.
I think we're constantly changing. I think we're constantly changing people, and because of that, I find it hard to think that there's just one person. Sorry, my mom's calling me.
Oh, your mom?
Yeah.
You want to... I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You do not want to click on her right now.
No, it's okay. I texted her this morning. She's probably gonna just ask me something later. But yeah, like I think we're constantly changing, and I think that makes it hard to be the one, because I can tell you, you know, somebody I was looking for probably like 4 years ago per se, right? It's definitely not what I'm looking for right now. Okay. So I think with that mindset, like I'm like, you know, it's hard to say like, oh, that's the right person. But then when you finally do meet that person, then you're able to grow with them, and you're able to like, you know, take that next step together, right? Okay. And so that's why I don't really think there's the one per se.
All right, I'm going to ask this for both of you.
I'm scared.
Did you guys ever, in some point in your dating life, admit that you thought they were the one?
Oh, mercy.
Let's go deep.
I'm gonna get in trouble, Connie.
But no. The reason why I'm asking this, and you don't have to answer it, but
No,
I already
Kevin,
see
answer
it. That I wonder if it's because you had a bad experience, that your perspective on the one was kind of like obliterated.
Ooh, mercy, Jesus.
So that's why I asked the question, because I want to go in like deeper. What's the mindset? Why don't you believe in the one? And so based on what I was hearing on both ends, I'm like, could it be that they had a relationship where they really thought it was the one, but it didn't work out, and it just like shifted everything? So it's a question, and then I'm just wondering. I'm not saying that's what it was, but kind of curious.
Oh my God. You know what? I'm just gonna go and we'll go from there. You know, to be honest, like I'm thinking back, I don't think I've actually spent time thinking about this. So I don't know if I can answer this, you know, to my full knowledge, like right off the back of my head. But like,
This is so funny.
maybe.
Yeah.
I feel like, well, because here's the thing. I think when I was young, right, I was like probably like 15, 16 years old, you know, and you know, I'm at that point, like for me, I just felt like it was immaturity where, you know, every person that I would be with was like, oh, no, this is the one. This is the one. Okay. And when it would end, it's like, oh, dang, well, they weren't the one. So maybe at that point, subconsciously, right, I don't think, maybe over time, maybe that thought came into my head. It's like, maybe there isn't the one, but maybe there can be that right person who comes along and it becomes like what I explained earlier.
So you would associate it with just an immature stage.
Not to say that those who believe in the
We're
one,
talking about you.
But me personally, I would say
like for
that.
you isn't so much a specific person or a specific experience. It's just that after a while you came to this realization that maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
Is that how you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I would say nobody I've ever dated I've ever said, oh, she is the one.
Okay.
But I do remember being at a point in time, I'm like, you know, searching for the one.
Okay.
You know, so I think there was a belief that there was that right person out there for me.
Okay.
But to say that I've dated somebody and I'm like, oh, this person's the one, no. But now that I think about it, I think it's funny. So I think there have been people in my life though that I think I've looked at and I've pointed out, and I'm like, oh, she might be the right person for me. She might be that, but I never dated that person, so I never knew.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, I think there have been individuals that I feel like, oh, if I would have perhaps dated them, then they would have probably been the one when I was younger before. That's why, and maybe that's why I don't think there's the one, right? Okay. Because if they were the one, right? Like I said back then, then I should have been with that person. Okay. So that's why I don't believe in it as well.
All right. That's very interesting. Yeah. I know I put you guys on the spot.
No, that was a great question.
You definitely did, but it was good. It was good. Let us know, people. Like, let us know. Either DM us or on this video. You know, just let us know. Like, do you believe in the one? It'd be good to hear what our audience thinks.
Definitely. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's everybody has a different perspective, and I think And that's why I always want to go deeper. How did you get there?
Yeah.
And so, so personally, I do believe there's a one. And not because I'm with the one, but because you're talking to someone that at the age of like 10 was praying for my future husband. Like, I literally would pray to God for that person.
Wow.
Like, I truly believed that God would gift me that person. And so, for me, yeah, we're going to go into this. I shouldn't have met or married Will. Statistically, it shouldn't have happened.
Why do you say that?
Because of where I was in life and because of my cycles, because of my background. Typically they say you attract people that are like you, right?
Yeah.
And so in
Yeah.
some way, like for example, went to church in a Hispanic, Latino region in the conference. Will was in the English. So we didn't really have, I was 2 different conferences. There was no way that we were going to meet.
Yeah.
Like there's just so many things in our story that we shouldn't have met. But I saw, we even talk about, we see how God had his hand in everything. Like the people that we knew, the places, the right timing. It was just wild. Like we had seen each other, never thought we would ever meet. Later on, we meet. And to this day, like I've been married with him 8 years this year. And I pinch myself because I look at him and I'm like, I can't believe I married him. I can't believe I married this guy. Like for me, he's an incredible person. And to me, he is the one because the way that we connect is beyond. Like, and we sometimes joke around it, but sometimes we're very serious about it, that we feel like it was a God-ordained thing. Like, we really believe that God placed us together because, honestly, we have grown in such a way that has even impacted those around us, my family.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say, like, I do believe that there is a one.
You know what? Maybe if I find that person that then I'll have a different mentality of saying the one. But Kevin's in trouble.
No, I'm not in trouble. Well, who knows? Maybe like once I'm married, then I'll be able to like the day of the wedding. Like, you know what? Maybe that's what I can admit. Maybe I can take back
Like, I've been
every
waiting
word.
for this moment.
Yeah, definitely.
So, we all have different perspectives, but that's my journey and that's my relationship with my husband.
And yeah,
so,
no,
That's
I
beautiful.
totally, it's great. And you were talking about how you guys were part of different communities,
Yeah,
right?
different.
Different backgrounds.
Different.
You're Latino, grew up in Latino culture, and Will is African American.
Yep.
So how did your parents react to this? Like how was it? Because for the most part, I think in my case as well, I think my parents would like for me to marry a Latina woman, right? Or Latinx, right? Is that what we're saying?
Just keep going. Bro.
Okay. Yes.
That's another conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's always been that expectation.
Yeah.
For the most part.
course.
And not to say I'm against it, but those conversations are always interesting,
Oh,
right?
definitely. So, I don't know. Did you have something to say? No.
No, I want to hear more about this.
No, it's because I saw you at the corner of my eye, and then I was like, oh, I wasn't sure. So, Will is my first and only interracial dating experience.
Yeah.
So, how do I frame this? So let's say it like this: both families, his family, my family. At first, they had concerns. So, my parents were with the same thought that I would marry within the culture. And vice versa. His parents wanted him to marry within
interesting.
his culture. So it was very interesting because, Will and I, we just connected and we didn't see culture so much like as a hindrance for us to be together.
Yeah.
So funny, I told my mom who he was, and I told her he's black. And so she's like, she was just quiet. I'm like, Mom, he's a great, great guy. And so now remember, I know that race is a very touchy subject,
Yes.
but it's a conversation that we should have. I mean, every culture has biases.
Absolutely.
I mean, we can't act like it doesn't happen.
No.
I mean, within Latino communities, Asian, blacks, everybody, every culture has preconceived biases.
Yeah.
And so I think we should just expose the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Everybody has biases.
Yeah.
Especially where you grow up.
Yeah.
Who you interact with and what your experiences are with that culture. And so for my mom, she was just like, who is this person? You know, all these things. Now, we lived in a low-income community. It was very ghetto. So what she was exposed to, and, you know, she had already preconceived biases.
Yeah.
So I understood on her end, but I needed to push her to face those biases. So, funny, I went on a mission trip to Mexico, and Will was like, this was at the end of our program, and we weren't officially dating, but he was like, I will take your things down. We were in Northern California. I'll take your stuff down to your parents and drop them off.
Wow, what a nice guy.
Bold guy too.
I'm in
That's
Mexico.
bold. That's bold.
I'm in Mexico, and I'm like, oh man. And I couldn't get on the phone because there's no reception.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh man, he's gonna be there. And when I got back home, my mom told me the whole story. He came down, she opened the door, and she let him in, and they ate together without me.
Which is big, you
Which
know.
is big.
I think when you share a meal,
Yeah.
especially in the Hispanic household, I think it's
Yeah.
always big because you
Right.
have those conversations.
Yeah.
Just a little bit different. It's different being around the table.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
So he actually sat with my parents, with my family, and shared a meal. And they got to know him, and they were just like, wow, he's amazing. And so,
Sheesh, what a guy.
like, and that was incredible. And so vice versa, you know, I had to meet his parents, and we had to, you know, work through that. You know, they had biases as well, things that they had preconceived biases about culture. So, you know, it took conversations. So now when we're talking about expectations with parents, like, do I have to date, you know, according to what they want?
Yeah.
Well, here's what I do wanna I
yeah.
do wanna ask, because
Yeah.
I feel like language barrier could be a huge hindrance though. And the reason why I bring it up is from experience.
Okay.
My parents barely speak any English.
Okay.
And I was in a previous relationship where I had to essentially play translator. And so my parents would say something to me in Spanish, and then I would have to tell my girlfriend at the time and
Yeah.
basically say what they said, and then have to go back and forth what she said to tell them that.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, you know, in my mind, and at the time, maybe this was just my thinking once the breakup happened, you know, in my thought from then on is like, oh, well, it looks like I most likely will have to end up with a Latina girl, because, you know, for me, you know what, I love my parents, and I love, you know, would love for my significant other to be able to have a good relationship with my parents.
Yeah.
However, because of this language barrier, in my mind, I'm thinking like, oh no, they have to be able to speak Spanish.
Yeah. So, you know, and that's, you know, for you, that's big. That's a big thing. On my end, my mom talks to Will. She thinks she doesn't speak great English, but she does.
Yeah, she does.
And they have awesome conversations. Like, literally, we'll go on walks, and they'll go together and just talk. And he understands her. And so even though in the beginning it was kind of broken, he could still understand her. He provided that safe space for her. Now, so I'm talking about like home. We are a multi-generational family. So that means that my family lives with us, and we live with them. So that helped so much. They have a great relationship. Language, Will had to learn. So he now understands when we're talking. He understands how she jokes. She understands, you know, the culture jokes and all that stuff. So it took learning on his end. So I think that, yes, language can be a barrier, but I think there are other ways to manage it.
Yeah.
And I know of many couples that interracially that don't speak the language of others, but you can still communicate in other ways, you know?
Yeah.
And in service and being present. So even though there might not be ongoing conversation, I think that you can still have a relationship.
Absolutely, yeah.
And learn. I think that's a great opportunity to learn from one another, and not being afraid to be in the position of, well, I don't know what they're talking about. You
Yeah.
know, like,
No,
but I
use
can
it
learn.
as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Definitely. You know, and I think something else I always think about with expectations, especially in Christian households, is, you know, some dating within your religion, right? And I remember this was my junior year of college. I was staying at the home of some family friends of ours, and he asked me probably a question I was not ready for, and he asked me, Joseph, do you think you can date somebody outside of Adventism, or even somebody who's not Christian?
Yeah.
And he stung me, right? And then the answer I said at the time was, yes, I think I can do it.
Okay.
And he's like, okay, I respect that. But he's like, I don't think you should. And then of course I was like, what do you mean? Like, I think I always prided myself on being like, I can talk with anybody, I can have a relationship with anybody, and it'll be good. And it caught me off guard. And then he's just like, well, think about your situation, right?
Yeah.
Think about everything that you're doing. You know, I've had this conversation with my parents before about dating somebody who's not Christian or not.
Yeah.
But then when, you know, just talking with him, it was definitely, it changed the landscape a little bit, because I was like, okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
You know, how important is my religion to me? You know, how important are my values?
Right.
Because that's what it comes down to, right? We have a lot of values, we have beliefs, we
Yeah.
have, I guess, mannerisms, right? Is the word to use, that we have, that, to be honest, a lot of people are not used to.
Yeah.
And it honestly,
And we have a different lingo.
we have different lingo,
You know?
you know. So, you know, it's funny, right? Because every time I think of Adventist lingo, I think of haystacks, and I still get PUC emails, right?
Yeah.
And then the other day there's this email saying,
Oh,
I don't know if you
yeah.
got it.
Yeah, I
they
got
have
it.
no freedoms.
Yeah, there's no
You know,
freedoms.
so they're not doing haystacks anymore. But not a lot of people will understand that.
Yeah.
So, you know, how do you feel about, you know, managing that? You know, your parents want you to find a nice Christian woman, right?
Okay.
And they're looking for it.
Or a Christian man.
A Christian man, right?
Yeah.
But so how do you do? What do you handle? You know, like what's your advice in terms of, you know, dating in that context, and being in a relationship with that person?
No, that's a great question. So my mom. The reason why I refer to my mom a lot, I come from a home that my dad has been disabled for 20 plus years. So I come from a home where mom is mom and dad. And so even though my dad is still there physically, emotionally he's not. And so my mom had to be the one that counsel me. So her advice, and there are times that I grieve that I didn't have that male figure present in my life. Because I think maybe I could have made different choices. But as a mother, she would tell me, like, I want you to find someone that loves you. And so what I loved about her is that she really pushed values, not expectations.
Wow, that's huge.
So, and I think that's a difference that when we talk about relationships, we talk about expectations, but we don't really talk about values. And so that's what I learned with my mom. And of course, I'm a parent now. Of course, my child is 2 years old. But when I was thinking about this conversation, I was like, man, like, I want Ari to have the best, you know?
Of course.
Like,
Isn't that
it's
what
just
every parent wants for their child?
And I realized,
right?
wow, every parent, I was like, I feel y'all. Like, of course, you want the best for your child. You want your child to be financially secure. You want your child to have some sort of status or name for themselves. You want them to have the education. You want to have a lovely girl, a handsome man to provide for the family, whatever it may be. As parents, we really want the best.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, what is the best, and can that be achieved?
Okay.
You know, and it's the whole settling, you know, because we were talking a little bit about settling yesterday when we were chatting. And so I was thinking of that. I'm like, man, this kind of like opens the door to Pandora's box, because then it's like, well, let's elaborate what our expectations and what our values, and when do you know when you're settling? Because you have third parties looking into your relationship.
Yeah.
And this is, and I was talking to my sister this morning. I was like, man, I didn't realize how many times I've heard this, where a parent, a friend will say, you can do better.
Oh.
You know? Like, I've heard that in conversations with friends, and they're like, yeah, my mom said, you know, I can do better, that, you know, he's not good for me, or she's not good for me.
I've said that to people before.
And I realized I actually have been in conversations like that, like she's settling. And then this morning I thought, okay, what is settling, and how do we define settling? So I think that's where that gap is, because we know our parents have expectations.
Yeah.
Hands down, we already know it. The issue is when that person that you're dating, that you're in love with, doesn't meet that. And then it's that whole like gray area of, am I settling? So then I wanted to talk about, what is settling for you guys?
Ooh, I think it depends, because I think what you just said right now, right? That seems to me like you're settling based on someone else's expectations.
Okay.
Versus you settling on your own expectations, or what you, so the way I see it played as something settling is, I wouldn't consider someone else's expectations my idea of settling, because that's their ideas, right? That's what they would want.
Right.
What I see is based on my value system, based on what I believe in, choosing someone that doesn't match with me.
Okay.
I think that's settling.
Okay.
You know, you can get some people, like, they could say, you know, looks wise, like, you know, you see this a lot, right? You see an okay guy with a beautiful girl, right here, you know, and for some people they could be like, yo, you're settling. You know, they could be telling Vanessa like, yo, you know, you could do better. Yeah. You know, and whether or not she's settling, that's
so hard, bro.
Huh?
Nothing.
Oh, hey, absolutely. You know what? I do it for myself, but I also want to be able for people to say like, dang, you know, Vanessa, you got a good looking boyfriend. Like, why not?
Yeah.
No, I'm proud of you. That's what I'm saying. Like, you definitely want to get up to her level.
Absolutely.
No, props to you.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that for you, settling is not so much based on other people's expectations. It's coming back to you and your expectations.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
No, definitely. I would have to agree with Kevin, because, you know, I think there have been moments in your life like you're willing to lower your expectations per se, or you're willing to be okay with something that you're not necessarily okay with.
Okay.
Like when it comes to, you know, the first thing is looks, right? That's what most people, the superficial stuff, like, oh, how do they look? Do we look on par? Is he more attractive? She more attractive? Okay. You know, but then you go into like emotional, right? And then you go into, you know, just the ability of, you know, how they handle certain things, right? I can remember saying one time like, oh, I don't like the way that, you know, that person treats somebody, you know, an example, right?
Okay.
But you know what? I can live with it, right? It's something that I can be okay with. And a lot of people, you know, they have that problem. They're like, oh, I think I'm okay with it, you know? And so I think that's where people run into it, because they're okay with it. They can live with it. Yeah. But should they be, you know, at that point when it's just okay to live with it, whether it's not their perfect standard?
Okay.
You know, because everybody has flaws, right? It's not every day you find that right person. And, you know, there are times where, you know, I think compromise is needed. So how do you find that balance? You know, how do you look for that? Because, you know, everybody is looking at their whole life, you know, their whole picture, and they're looking for that individual to date. And, you know, perhaps, you know, what happens if they check 9 out of 10? Right? Is the 10th, is it okay? You know, is that considered settling? Right? Or are we talking 5 out of 10? Right? So I think, you know, there's a lot of places to go. And I think for the most part, at least for me personally, you want to find that person who checks 10 out of 10, and I think you should. But
Okay.
is there ever a point in time where it's okay just to be, if you get 9 out of 10?
Well, I think, as you guys were talking, I was like, what if the conversation was flipped? What if, how do I frame it? Where people think that they're settling with you. And that's the thought. We can sit there. Let's just sit there.
Ooh. All right.
Because we always come from this perspective of, I'm settling. But have we ever actually put ourselves on the other chair and be like, are they settling with me? And that's where I was really, that's why I'm going to challenge this conversation. Because I'm like, wow, settling is a very tricky.
Yeah, and I think this is the truth, right? I don't think I've ever thought that they're settling per se. I think for the most part, you try to find somebody who's, you check everything with, so you don't have to think about that.
Right.
Because I don't want to think about that. just that's an awkward conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, if you're the guy, you're not to say you're kind of proud. You're like, hey, look, somebody over there is with me, and you can't help but feel a little bit like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't enter our minds that there's actually someone better than you. There's actually someone better than me in terms of education, wealth, maybe character. So that's why I want to let's challenge this conversation on expectations. What are the expectations, and how do you handle that in a relationship? Because for me, it's like we're all equals, and it was funny because I was talking to it's not funny, but I was talking to my sister this morning about it, and she was giving me some feedback on it, and it's like, I told her, I don't know something. She's like, wow, that sounds so dehumanizing.
Whew.
And I was like, that's a good word. And she's like, yeah, it's kind of dehumanizing. Imagine you're being rated by how you look, rated by your wealth, rated by your status, rated by your education, but not
who you
are. And I'm like, I was like, okay, we need to talk about expectations and what that is.
Yeah.
And how can we reframe it to a healthy way of seeing, are we actually compatible? Do you get me?
Yeah. So I want to touch on that. I'm glad you're bringing this up, and I can ask for forgiveness later about this. But no,
It might be edited.
It's not too bad. Don't worry. It's not bad. But I relate so much to this.
Okay.
And the reason why. So I think Joseph also brings up a good point, though, how you typically try to, when you're looking for someone, you typically try to go for someone who meets, those same values, those things that you would hope for, right?
Right.
And a checklist per se, right? I'm neither here or there when it comes to checklists. I don't necessarily agree that you should have a perfect checklist.
I mean, I did it when I was younger, so
But
I
let me say this. So Vanessa had somewhat of a checklist.
Ooh,
Okay.
I know where this is going.
Okay.
This is about to be
And
good.
mind you, most women, that's actually what we're encouraged to do.
Interesting.
Like in books, I'm talking about books, journals, and talking about relationships. They say write down, literally, we're pushed towards the checklist.
Interesting.
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she had this idea of the perfect man that she wanted, right? And so for her, the big things were definitely, someone that, could be close to her family, someone who, has a very strong, relationship with God.
Okay.
And, all these other things, someone, who's a very personable person,
Right.
who knows how to, interact with people. But the one thing that I think she wanted more than anything else is someone she could sing with.
Ah, interesting.
And if you know me,
You don't
I don't sing.
I mean, can you sing?
I can keep a tune. But there's
can say
no.
No, no, no,
no,
no,
no,
you
no,
can't.
no. There is a
No, I'm
strong
sorry.
difference.
I love Kevin, dude, but here's the thing. I've heard him in the shower,
Yeah.
and like he's good for like a couple measures, but then somehow his voice just goes somewhere else where it's not supposed to.
Here's what I will say, okay? Right? It probably people say like it has to do with practice or whatever, blah blah blah. Who knows? If I
Right.
practiced it more and I was actually serious about it, then yeah, maybe, But keeping a tune is very
practicing
different
right after
because
this.
right?
Yeah.
Because keeping a tune means you keep a tune, but you don't have a nice voice. Like imagine someone who can keep a tune versus I don't know Chandler Moore or Justin Bieber or whatever. Those people can sing. They
They
have
can
a
sing.
gift.
Yeah.
They can sing versus someone who can keep a tune. No.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah.
And so early on in our relationship, we actually had to get past this.
Because it
and
was so big.
It was so important for her.
Important for her.
And so I think after a while there were conversations that were had with her parents and
it was her parents also.
no.
Oh, okay.
So she's very close with her parents,
Okay,
and so
got it.
she basically had this conversation about I don't know like he's a great guy and whatnot, but like I don't see I would love to be able to do ministry with him, and for her ministry was someone that she could sing with.
Wow.
But then her parents flipped it on her and said, and basically challenged her like, what do you mean? He's a pastor,
Yeah.
or he's a God-fearing person. He loves Jesus. He loves serving.
Right.
You can do ministry with him. You may not be able to sing with him,
Right.
but you can still do ministry together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the reframing for her that she
Yeah.
needed, but was that a compromise for her? Maybe, like she had to give up this idea that she would
The
be
9
able
out
to
of
sing.
10. That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I based on what I'm hearing, and I loved that ending because that's what I encourage is that with doing things with the person. And Will and I were talking in the car about this that what he counsels with couples is that sometimes we're waiting to see. Let me see your cards. I'll show you my cards. And it's like, well, who has a better hand? What can I get from you? Type of thing.
That's
It's like,
interesting because I've
know-
never been a type to like care about the cards. I've always
Yeah.
been all about the person. Like I could care less how much money they have, what their job
Mm-hmm.
is, all of that. It's never been a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
But Kevin can tell you, I'm the type of guy that I like to be ready for anything.
Right.
Like I want to
Yeah.
be financially secure. I want to have all of those things in
Yep.
check. But that's just because that's the type of person I am. That's the personality I have. I love being the person people can come to and have that. Right. But for me, it's never been about what they have or pretty much what they can bring to the table.
Yeah.
It's always more of like, all right, is this the person I'm compatible with? And can we do this together? Can we
Yeah.
grow together? Can we do those things and have those
Yeah.
conversations that we're talking that that Kevin had to have with Vanessa?
Yeah.
Because that's the more important thing in my opinion than whether or not, she's bringing in like all of this stuff. Or maybe she
Yeah.
has a house or something,
But it's funny because what if it got flipped around? And that's where my sister and I, Lindsay, were having this conversation of the conversation that a female has with the male in regards to money. Let's say, for example, let's say the female is a doctor, a lawyer, it's the breadwinner. Because nowadays, that's where it's shifting. Breadwinner, and the guy that she's dating probably just has a high school diploma and is a blue collar. How do you have those conversations? And so we can't say that there are certain things
Crazy rich Asians, dude.
that are off the table.
Yeah.
For some people, these are life decisions that are really real. Yeah, we're compatible, but can we actually make it work? And
Yeah.
so that's where it's like tricky and I'm glad that for you, that's not an issue, but for so many people, it is an issue.
Yeah.
An issue with money, an issue with like status. It's probably not my thing. But there are people that really struggle because their expectations are so high or they just have a certain standard.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing where I'm like, wow, we need to change how we're doing this conversation about So going back to Will, and he was saying, like, it's all about how can we do it together. If your thing is financial wealth and financially security, how can we do it together? You're a spender, I'm a saver. How can we do it together? And that's really the goal in marriage.
Yeah.
And I think that we separate things in dating. It's like, are we compatible? And we might be compatible, but what about the things outside of that? Like, because those
matter too.
those
you're
are
right.
the things that actually impact your marriage.
Yeah.
We were reading. Will sent me an article about of divorce, and you've always heard it. Finances are the number one reason that couples divorce, and bad credit score, debt, things like that. That is the main reason. And so, yeah, we focus on that, but there are other little things, and that's why I think people get these expectations and want to stick to it because they're like, we want to be secure.
That should matter. Yeah.
so-
I mean, I think it's, I don't know. I find it a little bit interesting you say that, right? Because when you're in that process of dating, and not to say it's important, right? But like, how about somebody, you're dating somebody who's gonna come in with $60,000 of debt on the table,
Right? Yeah.
And that's real debt, that's a
It's
lot.
real debt.
It's a lot of money. But I think, wouldn't you think if that's the person, like, we that have those traits, right? We're compatible. We're talking. We have that. That you think that if, let's say, we don't agree on money, then you shouldn't, be, for example, be in that relationship. Like, it should just be something you just try to talk to, and like, because I find, people in our age, right? A lot of people that are, mine and Kevin's age, they're still in school, right? They're building a massive debt from school, which is extremely expensive, and sometimes. I would hate to see money being the reason why somebody's not together.
And it's.
And I know you're talking about, like, having the conversations and talking about it.
Yeah.
And
I'm talking about having the conversation.
Yeah, I know, definitely.
It might not be us.
Yeah.
But that is something very real with young adults. But where I want to go with it is that, we have expectations, but how can we reframe the whole settling?
Yeah.
Okay. I got you.
Into what I believe is values.
Okay.
Hearing what you were saying about Vanessa's list were values.
Yeah.
The value of family, the value of God, spirituality. Those are I believe values, if they match with the person, you really can go forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, like growth, things like that. Because then, whatever around us that we probably don't agree on, we can probably work through it.
Yeah.
And so I think that I don't like using the word settling because that's projecting my biases to someone else.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's fair to them because they are who they are.
Yeah.
And I have to own my own expectations. So what I would say for people that are dating, get a clear understanding of what you're expecting. What are your expectations? Are they unrealistic? And are they just absolute, it's not going to happen. Like.
It's funny you say
Like,
that because
we're-
Kevin and I were like having a conversation about this morning.
Yeah.
Just about like, where do we see ourselves 10 years from now? Like,
Yeah.
are we going to be like middle class family,
Yeah.
upper middle class, lower
Right.
middle class? Like, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
The little things that you don't even tend to mention. you
Yeah.
know?
And so I think when we learn what our biases are, I think we can truly see the condition of our heart, of our own mind, and see, do I even live up to this? But also, what are some values that I want more than my expectations?
Yeah.
Because I've seen this in relationships when they're dealing with the whole settling, it's love competing with expectations. And it's like, which one? Which
Love
one?
versus expectation.
Yeah, and I think that love founded with values is gonna take away that expectation.
Yeah.
You're gonna be able to work through the things that you don't agree with. So
No, definitely.
that's my opinion.
Yeah, and you know what? I think to just resolve this whole part, right? I think I've seen it in resolving the whole thing that I brought up with Vanessa. I think I think what both of us came to understand, and I think for a while I became a little insecure about it too, because I was thinking like, you know what, this is something that I wish I could have with her, because I see just how important it is to her.
Yeah.
You know, and to not be able to have that, right, kind of like it did take its toll for a while, but I think the thing that we landed on was, we can't let one thing
Right.
that we don't necessarily share in common,
Yeah.
or as strong as we may feel about this one thing, right,
Yeah.
affect the entirety of our relationship.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
so what we also saw is, outside of this, outside of the whole fact that I can't sing, right?
Yeah.
Outside of that, we work really well together. Our thinking may be different.
Right.
You know, it can be different at times, but at the end of the day, like, our values still remain the same.
Yeah.
And I think because we're able to agree on those things, and not to mention, like, you know, we really care about each other, and we're happy together, you know. And even if it was that one thing, we realize, like, all the other things are so much more important than that one thing.
Yeah. No, definitely.
That's powerful.
Good way to end that little part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So here's what I actually want to ask then, because for some people, I feel like it's harder to have those conversations.
Right.
Right? It's not easy to bring it up.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had some people, you know, bring up certain conversations. So, and I want to hear your stance on this, because a lot of people hear about premarital counseling, but there's this thing out there that has been brought to my attention recently, and I didn't know how to feel about it at first, because I thought it was still kind of weird. But there's this thing called pre-engagement counseling. And I'm curious to hear your take on that, because I feel like for some people, having this conversation, first of all, is a hard conversation to bring up.
Of course.
And some people just aren't comfortable doing it.
Yes.
But I think, you know, pre-engagement counseling, you know, could potentially be something to help people kind of get there if they struggle to do it on their own.
Yeah. You know, I remember what you said last podcast, where in a relationship there should be some easiness. Easiness? What did you say? It was that the word?
Yeah.
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 I said easiness.
Like, it's hard, but there should be that easiness. And so I'm very conflicted with this part, because we're talking about communication again.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so I have met people that have had counseling in that form, but I think they really want to make it really, really work. And my biggest concern was, is this right? Is this the type of person? I was like, if you guys are in my head, I didn't say this, but in my head is like, if you guys can't communicate now and you have to seek help,
What will change it? Yeah, will it really change it?
what are you guys, in my head, when I was hearing it, what are you doing to work at it where this is something you continue on? Look, I've done therapy. I love therapy. I'm an advocate for therapy. But even my own therapist said, you are not supposed to be in this chair your whole life. That's for me.
Good.
That is,
That's
yeah.
good.
She's like,
I like that. I like that a
am
lot.
here to empower you and, you know, of course, mine was revolving around trauma.
Yeah.
And honestly, I did intensive therapy, and I call it intentional therapy, for like 2 years. And so, because I asked her, I'm like, how long is this going to take? And she's like, you dictate. And she's like, but I do not want you in my chair for the rest of your life. And so that's where I would challenge couples, is like, okay, what is the issue? And if you're able to go to counseling, which I think it's a healthy alternative than bickering and going around the bush about certain situations, and you guys want to make it work, I would say go for it. But what is the game plan after that? What are you doing to actually communicate more effectively? Are you reading? Are you taking courses? Are you actually implementing what you're learning? Because then it goes to premarital counseling, Then it goes into counseling and marriage counseling. And it just, there's always that third person in your relationship.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, that's why it's conflicted. It's like, okay, there's a communication issue. Why?
Okay.
Is someone closed off? Who is it? How is the other person reacting to it? So that's why I feel conflicted, because it's like, is that the person that, is compatible for you? But if you feel like they are and you're in love with them and you want to make it work, then why not? But with the mentality, we weren't made to sit on a chair as a couple
to figure it out. We should be able to do it on our own.
Yes. Look, I know we're hitting time, but with Will and I don't even think it was something spoken, but Will and we decided on our relationship, our issues stay in house.
Okay.
And that kind of goes into boundaries a little, but that was a boundary that we set. Not that we don't want a therapist, that we were always open to a therapist. But talking to our friends or things like that, it all starts in-house. We need to deal with our issues first.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Then if there is something more complex that we cannot figure it out, then we seek help. But that's just how we work. And that's what has helped us, because we're literally in the trench.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with it. We're hearing
With
each
you guys,
other.
yeah.
We're hearing, is there something that you made me feel a certain way? Did I say something? Did I do something? Confronting it head on.
No,
And so.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's super. Yeah, just you guys keep it within yourselves.
Yeah.
Because I think there's always this thing, right? Like you try to figure out what you should do, and you start talking to other people. I do that from time to time,
Yeah.
and then like your head gets really messy, right?
Oh,
Because
Yeah.
then
You have all
so
these
many
different
you have
voices.
all the opinions,
Yeah.
and I think that's something we should definitely.
I think learning to stay in the trenches, but of course, it's a two-way thing. It's not a one-way. So you might have a perspective, but the other person might not.
Yeah.
And that's where that.
Communication.
And so I'm like, okay, is the person is willing to budge with you? Not. What's gonna happen? Because marriage requires a lot of communication.
And you,
Yeah.
What can we?
Oh, no, go finish your thought. It's fine.
No, you go.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna shift the conversation.
No,
That's
me
yeah,
too.
yeah,
That's what I
okay.
was gonna do.
So you did mention boundaries. Then
Yes.
I think that would be a good segue into discussing like what
Yes.
kind of boundaries should you be able to set in your relationships.
Yeah, so look, everybody has a different personality. We're all different personalities. My personality is so different and more like upfront, confrontational, like, I'm just more in that space.
Yeah.
There are others that are more shy, which is not a bad thing. There's not good or bad. So my relationship is different. And so, but I can share what we do. So like, again, like I said, we talk about our issues in-house. One of the reasons is because he's a pastor. One of the last thing I need or want is to people to view my husband differently
Yeah.
based on just one scene and not the whole person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that includes my family. So we all live together. So I don't run to my mom and tell her my issues. It's just I do not want her to view my husband differently. So that's one boundary of that we've set. This is our space. This is our time. Also, when we have arguments, we don't ever do it in front of people. Not even our own daughter.
Wow.
If we're gonna have a discussion, I'll be like, Mom, can you like, now again, we don't fight, but we'll have a discussion.
Yeah.
But we don't get loud or anything like that. But my sister will take my daughter, and Will and I will just sit on the floor, literally on the playpen there, and just like talk it out.
Yeah.
And so we don't have discussions about our issues ever in front of people. That's between us.
Yeah.
Again, it's privacy. It's nobody needs to hear it.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to be involved. They don't need to know. And so
That's good.
we share it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
What was the issue, how we resolved it, and whatnot. And Will can share it up in the sermon. It can be sermon
But
material.
like once it's actually
Yeah,
dealt
once
with.
it's done.
It's
yeah.
already dealt with. But that's how we resolve. So on issues of arguments and conflict in that sense, it's all private, all in-house, all with a rational voice. If I'm not going to be rational, I can't talk to you because I do not want to hurt you.
Okay.
I don't want to say something hurtful. The other boundaries could be decisions. You know, like if I want to spend my money on a certain thing, you know, like, but see, again, these are boundaries in marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boundaries
So,
in dating. I mean, Kevin, what would
yeah.
you say would be some boundaries in dating per se? For,
Yeah.
you know, you're the one in the relationship.
Yeah.
Now we're going on you.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I think
Because
yeah.
I'm single, so let's go.
Yeah. Well, okay.
We'll
Let,
come back to
No,
you,
you know,
though.
we're done with me. It's his turn
I'm
now.
fine with it. I don't. You don't like being put on the spot, being asked these questions. I thrive. in
No
this,
problem.
I'm
I just think it's
perfectly So just a reminder, right? So
Yeah.
this is probably gonna be like our last little segment before
And we have one
Yeah.
more thing.
before
Yeah.
we end.
Yeah.
But so what I will say is I think the big ones. There's three, right? There's emotional, there's physical, and then
Yes.
there's spiritual. And I
Yes.
think spiritual would probably be the best place to end because
Yeah,
I'd
of
love
course.
to end with having God in the equation in these
Yes,
relationships.
I agree.
But I definitely think like emotional boundaries should actually be something that are very important
Yes.
within dating relationships.
Yes, I agree.
So I guess for myself, really the question would be like, what kind of emotional boundaries should we think about having?
I'm trying to, it's like very broad, but, and deep. So I'll just keep it very up here. I think emotional boundaries is learning self-care and you having self-care. You learning how, that's the word I was looking for. You growing your emotional intelligence. You learning how to regulate your own emotional temperature, not depending on someone else to do it for you.
Nah,
That's
absolutely.
my biggest one that I have with people is that codependency should not be an issue in a relationship.
Absolutely.
And so it starts with you caring for yourself.
Yeah.
You caring how you deal with your sad moments, how you deal with your temper. That's
Yeah.
on you.
Yep.
And that's why I always bring everything. I cannot control someone else's emotions. I can't control the other person, but I can control
Yes.
how I behave.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about emotional and mental health, for me, it's take care of you first before you try and help someone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and vice versa. And so in a relationship, what I see is this ickiness and it gets sticky.
Yeah.
And this person's like temper is really high and this person was able to like help them calm down. And I'm like, okay, that's not healthy.
No, it's not.
It's not healthy if your temper is high and you need someone else to calm you down. Okay, I've had that moment like once or twice in my life, but never like to the extent that every time I'm angry,
Yeah.
I go, to a person to calm me.
Yeah.
I think
And
I want to build on that because I also feel like some people, especially in arguments, there's yelling involved.
Yes.
And my issue is I feel like you demean the other person when you yell.
Yes.
When you get into this yelling back and forth, right? I feel like because things can get so heated in those moments, people end up saying things that they later on regret.
Yeah.
And so I think that for me personally, right? Like Vanessa and I, when we do, have our conversations, it's more like, hey, this is how I felt when this happened.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
very respecting of the other person's, because you also want to respect the other person, and make sure that, emotionally they're still intact and you don't destroy the other person.
Yeah, and it happens. I think, I don't know, did you?
No, I have
okay.
nothing. Go.
What I was going to say is, why do we yell? So that's my first question is, why do you yell? And typically, if I were to yell at my daughter, is usually because she's in danger or I need to get her attention, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think of yelling, I'm thinking you're trying to get the other person's attention. So what I see is a battle of getting attention. So
Interesting.
I'm like yelling at you and you yell back because you want me to listen to you. And it's just this escalating of yelling. And that I'm like, well, then that's not effective. Like if my yelling is not bringing you down to be like, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
What, like, there are times that will show like some behavior, like just out of his nature, and I'll stop and I'm like, what's going on? What's happening? I was like, and then he's like, nothing. I'm like, yes, it is. And I'll point it out. I'm like, you did this. I was like, do you need space? And he's like, no. And he's like, I'm sorry. You know, I'm frustrated about this. And I'm like, okay, do you want to talk about it? There's signals that people have, and that's with dating. You get to know them.
Yeah.
But why do we have to resort to yelling when the other person's going to yell back? So it's like, well, why don't we find another way to get our attention? Maybe it's the environment that we're in. Everybody's loud, you know? Maybe we need to go to a quiet space. Maybe we need to put our phones away. You know, there are just so many alternatives.
Yeah.
But the question would be, why yell?
Yeah.
And it's usually attention.
And I remember when
Yeah.
you said that, like, you and Will don't yell. And
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? That's definitely something.
We got that a lot.
I know.
Our friends, they're like, wow, I really got that, the whole yelling. They're like, we didn't know you didn't do that.
Yeah, I think it's huge.
Yeah.
I think it's a big step, you know?
Yeah.
Kevin gets mad when I yell at him.
Yeah, I don't like it.
So we should talk about you guys and begin. I'm
Well,
just
that-
kidding.
nah,
I'm just kidding. But
That's for another time.
definitely, I would
Off
say,
camera.
Yeah. Boundaries in that. Mental health is a big thing. And then the physical. I mean, that's a whole nother. But all I have to say is that when someone says no to something, we have to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And physically, emotionally, spiritually, any place, if someone says no to something, step back
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and listen and see, is there things that you can compromise? Is there things that are definitely off the books?
Yeah.
And that's a whole different conversation, such as sex and whatnot. So my biggest thing is respecting boundaries looks very differently.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone says no,
Means so.
it means no.
Yeah.
And I feel like people just try to find ways, you know, like
Yeah.
squeeze in there, like that gray area. But I always have that, if you say no, step back.
And then we have a spiritual, and I think we'll end here,
Yeah.
right? How do you deal with God in relationships? Right? Because, I mean, and maybe we can go around real quick, and
Yeah,
we'll start
yeah.
with Kev,
Yeah,
and then
please.
we'll see, you know, God in relationships, right? Because with dating, it's very tricky, right? And I think even more so now that, you know, I'm a pastor, right? And, you know, Kevin is too. It's a little bit more like that side of me is something it's hard to open up for, right?
Yeah.
And,
I
you know,
get you.
I know
It's a very intimate part
it's
of
a
you.
very intimate
Yeah.
part of me. And I remember there was this one time I was in a relationship, and that person told me that, you know, they expected more from me on the spiritual side, right?
And it's hard for you because you're a pastor.
Yeah, but this was
And
before I
so-
was a pastor.
yeah,
though.
but even now,
Yeah, but even
yeah.
now, and I remember, like, when they told me that, I was shook to my core, right?
Yeah.
Because I was just like, man, like, first I was trying to figure out what that even meant, right?
Yeah.
And then you're just like, but then I started thinking, and there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the hardest part for me to let known about myself and sharing my spirituality. And I'm not talking like beliefs, right? But I'm talking about that personal relationship that I have with
Yeah,
Jesus,
yeah.
right? Which, you know, in terms does reflect with who you are as a person, right? But
Yeah.
it's different when now it's becoming a little bit more intimate, right? And you're, you know, for example, there's always the questions about should you do devotionals if you're just dating, right? Do you
Right.
do you pray together
Right.
constantly, right? All of those little
Yeah.
things. And you know, like
Yeah.
like
I'm just laughing because Will and I did a vigil together. So, anyways. I'm just
yeah.
laughing.
So, but you know, these are questions people have. Like,
Yeah.
is there a point? You know, do you share? It's definitely a different part of dating.
Yeah.
You know, especially within a Christian relationship.
Yeah. No, and it's valid.
Yeah.
For you, that's a very important space.
Yeah.
And it's very
I think it is the
hard.
most important space for me. I can
Yeah.
totally say that because if there is, that's the last thing, right? That's the last level.
Yeah.
Because especially now that I'm in ministry, right?
Yeah.
Like if that were somehow to get shook a little bit, we're talking that like everything around me as well would be, because I love to say this, like, my foundation, I like to believe, my foundation is in Christ, right? And if that starts to get a little bit shaken, then everything around me is going to start going off a little bit. And that's how I've always thought about it sometimes, right? Like that I need to be sure, like, before I can open up that part of myself.
Okay.
That's interesting, and we've had conversations about this, and I understand it, what he's saying. I just look at it from a different perspective.
Okay.
Because I think for him, it's like, okay, we can connect with all these other things, but this is the one thing I gotta take care of before let's take care of everything else before I get there to be able to share that with you. And I don't work like that. I think for me, I'd rather have that be one of the first cards on the table, so that it's like, if that doesn't work out, I'm out already.
And it's valid, and I totally get that, right? But it's just never worked like that for me.
No,
like,
and
I've never
that's
been
why I
able
said,
to do it.
Like,
it's
your personality.
And so I think when it comes to spiritual boundaries, first thing and foremost, right? First, you got to figure out where you are spiritually before you can even develop any type of spiritual boundary. And I would say is the first spiritual boundary that you should have is figure out your own spirituality first before you can even set something. I think that's the very first thing that I would say, is because if you're struggling spiritually and you don't have it figured out, you can never rely on the other person. Kind of what we talked about earlier. You can't rely on the other person to
bring you up.
In a dating relationship, I would say I think it'll change, in marriage. But even what I will say is, regardless if it's marriage or not, you can't rely on the other person to feed you spiritually.
No,
because that's not their job, and they can't fill that part.
I think there's a difference in what you're saying. Is there's a difference between feeding someone and supporting someone.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think those two, we have to mention that in marriage, it's about supporting.
Yes.
I fell, and spiritually, and to the point that I was just doubting God. Will had to pick me up. But it wasn't like he was feeding me. He was just like, I'm here. And I had to go through that journey, and God and I were able to deal with it. And he was just a presence.
Absolutely.
And so that's
he wasn't the source.
He was not the
definitely.
source. Not the source.
And so I think for me, like that's my boundary, is the moment I see that I'm relying on this other person for my spirituality, that's when I have to take a step back and actually evaluate myself, right? But I would say the other thing also, in terms of having devotionals and whatnot, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with having devotionals with your significant other, unless that's the only time you're ever having devotionals to begin with. Because again,
it's reliance.
Then that's relying on the other person, right? What I will say is, when it comes to Vanessa and myself, I think our spiritual, because I think we acknowledge, she has her own walk with God and I have mine, right? We encourage each other, and we're like, hey, you know what? If you're feeling down, like, I'm praying for you, but I don't think we go any deeper than that, because I think at this point in our lives, right, I don't want her to ever rely on me, and I don't ever want to rely on her. I'd rather be able to have my own spiritual walk, but then at the same time, I want her to be able to figure hers out, because I feel like when you both have strong spiritual lives individually, when your spiritual lives come together in certain ways, that's when I think the magic happens.
And I have to say, like, I think one thing, when you're looking, right, and you're looking for somebody to date, it's not to say I'm looking for somebody who has like you for the most part, you have an idea of, like, okay, this person has a better relationship with God than other person, right? But I think there are definitely times where you have to, for me, that's why I leave it last, right? Like, we're both still growing in that aspect, right? And we're going, and not to say we don't talk about it. Like, I just, for me, I need to make sure that, like, she does have one as well, especially now bigger than before, right? Like, you have to make sure she has that in order for, us to continue. It's not to say that it's like the last thing I do, but letting somebody in, right, into that aspect of my life, I think is the hardest thing. Of course, not to say that I don't talk about spirituality with people, right? With somebody else, but it's just I think there's like like levels, right, that you unlock, right, within as you get to know somebody. And you could be still growing spiritually without you showing yourself fully, right? Like you said, in a way, you're not. It's like you're holding back one of the cards, right? And people do that all the time, right? They
Oh,
hold
yeah.
back something that they understand. Like, if this is something that I just need to make sure, like, before I can share it with
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
The last thing I actually wanted to share before you share
Yeah,
your
and
part.
we'll probably wrap up soon
Yeah,
as well.
this is the last thing that I would say is when it comes to the spiritual boundary that I've seen personally for me is if my spiritual walk with God isn't going well, or if hers or the whoever that other person may be for our audience, right? That shouldn't dictate where your relationship is going. Because personally, like
No, I'm
like
hearing you. Yeah.
because and this is why, like, there have been times where I haven't done well spiritually, and our relationship tanks because I allowed something that was going on between me and God, and I put it on her. And I feel like that's something huge that people cannot do is if you and God aren't doing well,
Yeah.
you can't put the pressure on another person.
Yeah.
Because again, like that is too big of a weight that they're not ever meant to carry.
Yeah.
So for me, like,
Don't project.
don't project.
Yeah.
That's the big one.
Yeah, I agree. In my situation, I see myself when we talk about spirituality, it's a lifestyle. I mean, that's our life.
Yeah.
We're a pastoral family, pastoral couple, so it's like embedded in everything that we do and how we minister and how we interact with people. So for me, I'm like you, same thing. From the get-go is like, where are we at spiritually? Like, not in the sense of like, are you higher than me? Or like, where's your spiritual health?
Yeah.
at,
Yeah.
And so for me, and I get yours too. Probably not in that aspect, maybe in other aspects, where there's just something that is very close and dear to your heart that you're not going to allow just anybody.
Yeah.
And that for you is that. So there's nothing wrong with it. But in our situation, Will and I, we were already in ministry and doing two separate ministries, but we came together
In a way through ministry.
through ministry. So spiritual health, I agree that my thing is we're all human.
Yeah.
We all fall, and I think there's this big push of spirituality during dating that got to have it together. But come marriage, I see a lot of issues with that because something happens. A loved one died, and now they're doubting God. How can God allow that?
Yeah.
You have issues of health. How can God allow me to have cancer? You get real life crises in marriage that really shake up a foundation.
Yeah.
And the question is, are you emotionally and spiritually healthy to be able to be a support to someone else? And vice versa. And so for me, it's always about growth. Are you there to support me? Walk with me. Are you willing to carry me if I fall? And that's what Will and I have always been like. I've had to help him as he grieves, like.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've learned how to like literally put everything to the side and just focus on him and just like feed him. That's ministry. That's helping someone in their spiritual walk. Is it depending on me? No, but like helping him feed like food. Like he needs food, you need water, you need to take your vitamins. That's supporting someone to get back up on their feet. And so I do believe that there should be there shouldn't be a dependency of being fed. But there are times that I love talking to Will. Like, he is someone I respect and is someone I look up to. So sometimes we'll have conversations and I'm just like mind blown because, and there are times that I'm talking to him and then he's just like he'll just get up from the table. He's like, that was so deep. So we share those moments and we feed each other together, but we're not dependent like, hey, I need my devotional today. give me my sermon today.
No,
it just doesn't work that way. So,
and I love how you say that, because I talk to Will about it a lot of things all the time. And, he always says like in the morning, I take Ari for bed, and then Connie has her time, right? And then like vice versa, right? Then like you come, and then he's able to have his time as well. And every time he words it like that, I'm like, wow, like it's not like you guys are together in the room or FaceTiming and just be like, oh, we're reading this right now, let's discuss it.
We're not
But
like that.
you guys are each having personal. You guys both know that you guys are both having that conversation with God.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it should be.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, we've had devotionals.
No, I bet. Yeah.
God has literally will bring us together on a certain topic, like for example, stewardship. And together we've like delved into it together, and we're like, and then God then puts us in our own journeys again. He has his church. He has his own line of, this is where God is leading me to read on sanctuary. I'm reading about the grace of Jesus or something. Could be different.
Yeah.
It could be so many things. But what in all of this is that spirituality, it's all about what you and the other person come in agreement to. It's not what it should be, but what works for you. If you guys are both struggling spiritually, then why not pray together? Start there, and learn how to pray by yourself. And so I'm all about get devotionals, be resourceful, be informed, understand theology. Don't wait till someone tells you about it. Go ahead and look, be curious about it. It's not about things. And I think that we're scared to go into those questions of who God is. Why does God allow, the whole big question, why does God allow evil and sin? Look for yourself. And so as a couple, you can do it together, but I do encourage individual. And so,
Well, I think that's
I know it was a little broad, but
no, I loved it. I think it was great.
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
I mean, I think the takeaways, right, would be that your expectations in relationships, like I love the fact what you said, Connie, about values is at the end of the day, it's not the expectation, it's the value that's most important when navigating through that. And then in terms of boundaries, I think the big takeaway I would say is, how can I best bring out the best in someone else? And whether that be emotionally, physically, spiritually, all these. The best thing that I heard someone tell me is, it's not about what lines you cross.
Yeah.
It's more about how do you honor that person best.
Yes. I love that.
Definitely.
I think for me, and that's something Will and I were counseled, was willingness. The willingness to forgive, the willingness to love, the willingness to support, the willingness that if you're going to be in a relationship, make it work. Do your best. And because it does require work, but it's an investment.
Yeah.
And I think it's worthwhile when you're walking with that person in your life, and ups and downs, you can look over and they're right next to you.
Yeah.
And that's the best feeling in the world. Living in the life that we're in right now, especially during a pandemic, is you see that person and you're in it together. And so journeying through thick and thin, poor, wealthy, whatever it is. I mean, marriage. But, it's just a wonderful feeling. So investing is a good thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys.
Oh, what are your final thoughts?
Huh?
Your final thoughts.
No, dude, that's great. that's great.
He's taking a break from this episode.
Yeah, I'm good. This was awesome. We just want to thank you guys for listening. Connie, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
This has been so much fun, so great. I hope people listen and they're able to take some of your wisdom, right, and your experiences, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, definitely. This was a longer podcast, so to our listeners out there, you know what? If you refer this to someone, tell them to listen to it in segments.
Yes.
And thanks for hanging.
Yeah, thanks for hanging with us. It was a longer one, but I think they'll appreciate the conversations that were had.
Definitely.
But hey, guys, you were listening to the Elevate podcast with Pastor Kevin, Pastor Joseph. Don't forget to subscribe
There you
to
go.
our social media. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on our Instagram page at Elevate the Name, and just check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube. And we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
All right.